County DA's Debate 2018 on 23ABC starts now.
And good evening, I'm Tim Callahan in our 23ABC Debate Night studios, where we are connecting you with the candidates for Kern County District Attorney. And we're both joined by both candidates, Supervising Deputy District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer and Assistant District Attorney Scott Spielman. Candidates, I want to thank you both for being here. In just a moment, we're going to get right into the issues. But first, a quick programming note about how tonight will go. You will have 1 minute each to address the voters and let them know why you're best for the position, and you'll have your opening remarks. You'll then be given 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer each question. We have a series of questions lined up here, and then you'll be given 30 seconds to rebut what the previous candidate answered during their original answer. And a quick note here, we did do a coin toss before tonight's debate to determine who will get the opening remarks first and who will take the first question. Mr. Spielman, you won that coin toss. You will begin tonight with our first opening remarks. You have 1 minute to address the voters.
Thank you, Tim. My career in public safety began in 1984 when I joined the United States Army as a military police officer. I did that for 3 years. I worked patrol supervisor, and desk sergeant. Then I went to Fresno State and then McGeorge School of Law up in Sacramento. Then I came here 24 years ago. During my 24 years as a prosecutor here, I've done 105 felony jury trials, 21 of them murder and 20 of them sexual assault cases. I know what's needed in the courtroom. For the last almost 8 years, I've been working as the assistant district attorney. That entails that I'm the second in command. In our office, we have 90 prosecutors. There's an elected DA, then there's myself as the assistant, then a chief below me, 9 supervisors, and then the rest are line deputies. I'm responsible for budgets, personnel decisions. When Lisa Green is out of the office, I am the acting district attorney. And I look forward to your vote on June 5th.
All right, Mr. Spielman, thank you for that. And the same to you, Ms. Zimmerman. You have 1 minute to address the voters and let them know why you're best for district attorney.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm running for district attorney because I am committed to keep Kern County families safe. I was born and raised in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm a graduate of Cal State Bakersfield and Loyola Law School. 33 years ago, I came back to Bakersfield and joined the Kern County District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. And in that time, I prosecuted nearly every type of criminal case from misdemeanors to homicides. 20 years ago, I was promoted to the rank of supervisor, and for the last 11 years, I've been the leader of the gang unit. I have personally prosecuted a number of high-profile, notorious Kern County criminals and high-profile jury trials that lasted months that have included rapists, murderers, and I would appreciate that you would understand that I am appreciative of your vote on June 5th.
All right, thank you both for that, your opening remarks. I want to go right into the issues here. Our first question to you, Mr. Spielman, again, since you won the coin toss. Talking about the budget crisis at the county, and specifically as it relates to the DA's office, what would you tell a prospective deputy DA thinking about coming here to Kern County amidst the budget crisis and low staffing? What would you tell them why they should come to work here in Kern County?
They should come to work here because it's a great office to work in. And being a prosecutor is one of the best legal jobs that there is. You are seeking justice. You're using independent judgment in prosecuting cases, and you're looking for justice for all. You represent the people, all the people. It's a great job to have. Coming here as far as the budget, we've been fortunate enough that we haven't had to lay anybody off. And so for the last 8 years, I've been involved in the budget process. 2 years ago, I actually argued the budget before the Board of Supervisors. We had cuts to make, but we were able to take them out of existing positions, and then we were able to find additional funding to be able to keep those positions so that we could still aggressively prosecute our criminal cases. It's a very difficult thing, these budgets. We're in the third year of our 5-year reductions, and so we're anticipating at least 2, maybe 3 more years of reductions. Every year I've been dealing with that. I'm the one that knows the nuts and bolts of this office. I'm the one that gets in there, figures out where we can save money. I started with getting rid of my personal take-home car. And so that's just ways to figure out to save money. I started looking at myself first, and then I looked at others. I got rid of a cell phone that I had been assigned. My secretary, I decided to share the secretary with Lisa Green, the district attorney, and return my secretary to the pool of secretaries to help the other attorneys. So it's a matter of knowing how to save that money. And I've been able to do that and still bring in the technology to try to help our prosecution of violent crimes.
All right, Mr. Spielman, thank you for that. The same question goes to you, Ms. Zimmer. How do you deal with the budget crisis, and what do you tell a prospective deputy DAs why they should start and, to you both, play out your career here in Kern County?
Well, luckily, while the Board of Supervisors has cut funding to the District Attorney's Office, we haven't been as affected as other departments. And we've never had to lay anyone off. But what I would tell new employees is what I've told them for many years, because I've been supervising new employees for over 20 years and training them, that this is a fantastic office. Kern County is a great place to live. It's a fantastic office where you're going to get excellent one-on-one training. I've trained dozens of people, and there are so many aspects of what we can do here in Kern County to keep people safe. I can teach them about wiretap law, about DNA, about ballistics, and about these kinds of things that will inspire all of the people in the office to work together for the greater good to keep Kern County safe. But I will, however, in dealing with the budget crisis, work hand in hand with the Board of Supervisors and the CAO's office to come up with a plan where we can be more efficient and do what is right to do the best we can for the citizens of Kern County to keep them safe.
Mr. Zimmer, anything in there you'd like to rebut just in a process? It seems like you guys both are on somewhat of the same page, but you have 30 seconds if you choose to rebut.
Yes, and it's Spielman, not Zimmer.
I'm sorry, it's Ms. Spielman.
That's right. You know, it's in working with the Board of Supervisors, you know, please understand, I don't have a relative on the Board of Supervisors. I work well with everyone, including the Board of Supervisors. But when it comes down to it, you're in there fighting for the funds to be able to provide public safety. And sometimes you're in competition with other departments. You always try to work together, but it has to be important is how we solve the problems for public safety first.
And same to you, Ms. Zimmer. 30 seconds to respond to what Mr. Spielman said there.
I think it's extremely important not only to work with the Board of Supervisors, but with law enforcement. We have to work hand in hand with them to do the best we can in law enforcement. I can say I'm proud that I am law enforcement's choice for the next district attorney, as well as other county agencies like the Public Defender's Office. And we need to work hand in hand in a professional manner to do what is best for the people of Kern County.
All right, already diving into the issues. Thank you both again for being here. Our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage continues in just a moment with the candidates for District Attorneys Scott Spielman and Cynthia Zimmer. Stay with us as our Debate Night coverage continues here on 23 ABC News at 6. And welcome back to our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage, connecting you with the candidates for Kern County District Attorney. Both candidates here with us. I want to address our next question to you, Ms. Zimmer. It has to do with the backlog of cases at Superior Court. Of course, no secret, you guys have been dealing with a record number of cases backlogged. How would you deal and decide when to file charges, and what type of cases would you decide to reject and not prosecute?
Well, 2017 was our deadliest year on record, with 101 homicides in Kern County. We have to be able to keep up with that in order to protect victims. We have to be more efficient, and we have to work closely with law enforcement to get our cases into court. There are some things that can be done to facilitate the process. One of the things that I've been able to do is take cases to the grand jury. Sometimes that cuts a year out of the process of a case, because cases get delayed in preliminary hearing court. I've indicted over 25 people in front of the grand jury on very serious cases, including homicides. But I would work and encourage the attorneys to object to continuances, to make sure that victims are afforded the right to a fair trial, just as the defendants are. And those are some of the things that I would do in order to encourage people, in order for the quick resolution of cases in court. As far as the backlog is concerned, I think that we all have to work together as an office. And if one team in the office is being hit particularly hard, like we were this year with gang homicides, and as well as all the filings that we did from one of the wiretaps, the blind mice case, then we have to come together and borrow people from other units to come in and assist where there is a need, because we are a family and we need to work together.
All right, the next question to you, Mr. Spielman, about the backlog of cases. How do you deal with it? Do you decide to turn away certain cases and not prosecute to deal with the backlog?
You never want to turn away cases because of a lack of resources. About 7 years ago, we suffered from AB 109. It was realignment, where they sent back about 2,000 felons back to our county to deal with. We saw our cases go from filing approximately 6,000 felonies a year. Within 2 years, we were filing 9,000 felonies. We didn't have the funds, the increase in our budget to really deal with that, with those types of numbers. So what you do is that you have to prioritize. But what you do is, when a case comes in for review, you are looking to see, do I have a reasonable probability of proving this case beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the standard that you're always looking for to make a decision whether or not to file a case. If you don't have that and you file a case prematurely and the person goes to trial and they're acquitted, you can never try them again. There's double jeopardy. And so you always want to be careful that you're using your resources to the best of your ability. But that's the standard that you're looking for when you're deciding whether or not to file a case. There was one time within the last 7 years that we did lose funding, and we were going to have to reduce how we were filing our misdemeanors and taking the lowest level crimes, not the ones with victims, actual victims, but the lower level crimes that were more quality of life crimes. And we were going to have to stop prosecuting those, and we did for a short period. But then we found the funding that enabled us to hire the prosecutors to restaff our misdemeanor unit. And so those are the types of decisions that you have to make about filing cases.
Mr. Spielman, thanks for that. Ms. Zimmer, you do have 30 seconds to address anything he said, talking about funding and increasing that to keep these cases going.
I would never fail to prosecute a case because of budgetary issues. There are enough of us prosecutors at the office that we can pitch in. And if I, as the elected district attorney, needs to go down to misdemeanor court and prosecute a DUI case, and I can tell you I will be there to assist those attorneys. We just can't do that. We have to have effective prosecution, and we can't allow people to go about and get away with crimes. We have to do what is necessary, and as district attorney, I will do that.
Mr. Spielman, the same to you. 30 seconds about the backlog and what Ms. Zimmer just mentioned there.
When you have significant decreases in your budget, then you have to deal with that. You can't just keep making campaign promises that can't be met if we don't have that funding. If you're going to bring down prosecutors, as I've heard us say before, from the homicide unit, then how are you going to aggressively prosecute those homicide cases? You have to prioritize. You can't just keep making promises. Even under the last administration, there were times we had to take a look to see what cases we might not be able to prosecute. So you have to do with what you have.
All right, thank you for that, both of you guys. We're going to come back. Our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage continues here on 23 ABC. Speaking with the candidates for District Attorney, we'll be right back at Debate Night here at 23 ABC. Welcome back to our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage, connecting you with the candidates for District Attorney. I want to get to our next question here. It has to do with high-profile suspects in court and being tried through the justice system. Do you believe high-profile suspects are treated differently in Kern County, specifically thinking about the John Giamara, the third case, felony charges reduced to misdemeanor charges? Mr. Spielman, this question first goes to you.
If you're talking about people that are wealthy, you can look and see about how their cases are handled, the attorneys that they can afford. But when you look at overall, everyone that's accused of a crime is given representation. It's an important process, or it's an important part of our legal system. It came out of the case was Gideon that said that you can't have somebody that's facing criminal charges that doesn't have the assistance of somebody who's trained in the legal field. And so everyone has legal assistance given to them if they can't afford it. But those people that can't afford it, sometimes there is frustration when you see somebody that it seems as though they're receiving a break on a case, or they got the better deal because they had better attorneys. And you have to understand that our county has a public defender's office. It has an indigent defense program that makes sure that we have quality attorneys that are representing clients. When you look at what happens on a Giamara case, sometimes people will be frustrated, but on that particular case, we were dealing with, in our office, what the police investigation revealed. And so you always have to approach every case individually. On that case, he did not cause that crash, so that's why he couldn't be charged with a felony DUI, but we charged him with a felony hit and run. And we were just as angered by everyone else when the judge took that away from the jury and made it a misdemeanor. So sometimes you have to look closely at every case individually.
And Ms. Zimmer, the same question to you. High-profile suspects that come through the court system, do you treat them differently? How do you go about each case?
Well, the majority of high-profile cases that have come through the courts in Kern County are cases that have dealt with homicides. And I have dealt with a number of high-profile homicide cases that we've had press in the courtroom every day. They've lasted for months and months. And I can tell you some of the finest attorneys that I have opposed have been attorneys from the Public Defender's Office and the IDP who have opposed me on those cases. So I think that it's very fair on those high-profile cases, the representation. I don't see anything unfair about it, and I think that they get very good representation. It's a pressure for everyone involved in a high-profile case, like the Sabrina Lamone case, those kind of cases. Both sides are somewhat under the microscope, as is the judge, for every decision that you make. But I think it's fair, and I think that I personally and other attorneys that have worked for me have risen to the occasion when you are under that kind of pressure, and you try hard to do the right thing, no matter if it is a high-profile case or someone that you have never seen or heard of that is charged with petty theft.
Same 30 seconds to you, Mr. Spielman, about having your attorneys equipped and ready to go, and also the defenders, the public defenders, whether they're ready to go. Do you agree?
Well, you have some senior public defenders in their office too that they tend to give the more serious of cases, and so that's how they would be assigned their caseloads. I'm sure similar to how we handle ours. But really, I think what your question is getting at is there a concern in the public about some people are treated differently because they're high profile? And public trust is something that's very important. We've worked very hard for the last 7 years to try to maintain that public trust so that we know that the justice is being dished out equally.
And you'll get the final 30 seconds specifically.
As district attorney, I would never treat people differently according to race, background, social class, wealth, or anything like that. I would look at the facts and the law and apply the facts to the law and determine whether a case should be filed, whether it should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and what the sentence should be.
All right, thank you both again, and our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage continues here at 23 ABC. We will get one final word from the candidates for District Attorney when we come back from break. Welcome back to our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage. We've reached time now for our closing arguments. Both candidates will have 1 minute to address the voters. Mr. Spielman, we'll begin with you. 1 minute to the voters is why you should be the next district attorney.
Thank you, Tim. I'm the candidate that has law enforcement experience. I also have the largest law enforcement association has endorsed me. I have law enforcement experience because I was a military police officer for 3 years. I carried a gun, a badge, and handcuffs. I also have the most courtroom experience. I've done 100 felony jury trials, 21 murders, 20 sexual assaults. And it isn't so much that the numbers, it has to do with knowing what's needed in court. And for the last 7 years, I have the leadership experience. I'm the one that has the management experience. I was a supervisor. I supervised about 10 people, as Ms. Zimmer does now. But I, for the last 7 years, have been supervising 250 in our office, helping to make the tough decisions on cases, whether to file them, what type of disposition, what cases have to go to trial. So those are the types of situations, including personnel and budgets, that I've been making those decisions, and I've been the acting DA. And that's why I'm the most qualified, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on June 5th.
All right, Mr. Spielman, thanks for that. Ms. Zimmer, the same to you. 1 minute is why you should be the next district attorney.
Elections have consequences, and it is extremely important that the voters have accurate information in order to make a choice. I am law enforcement's choice for district attorney. I have the endorsements of every local law enforcement association from all corners of Kern County. My opponent has made allegations in prior debates as to why those law enforcement associations have chosen to endorse me. And law enforcement has written letters saying his allegations of backroom deals are blatantly false, and they alienate law enforcement officers. I have been in trial in the last 7 years on high-profile cases and been in trial over nearly 400 days on rapes, robberies, and murders. My opponent has been in trial in the last 7 years in a 10-day case in which he didn't even prepare the case and sat second chair.
All right. That is your time there. We do want to continue the discussion here on 23 ABC. That does complete our debate here on 23 ABC News at 6. Our conversation with the candidates for district attorney, though, will continue. We want to give Mr. Spielman a chance to address some of those allegations coming up on our live stream. Thanks for joining us.
Debate 2018 on 23 ABC starts now.
And we'll continue our 23 ABC Debate Night coverage, connecting you with the candidates for Kern County District Attorney. Just a moment ago on 23 ABC, we're talking about a lot of issues from staffing to high-profile cases to backlogs within the District Attorney's office, and now each candidate will address that. I do want to go right into where we left off the discussion, and we'll begin and give you guys 1 more minute again to address the voters. We do have a new audience here joining us on social media. Tell the voters, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Spielman, why you believe you're the best candidate for district attorney.
I'm the best candidate because I have the best experience for the job. I also have the knowledge of running the office. I have the law enforcement experience, having been a military police officer. I have the courtroom experience, having prosecuted 105 felony jury trials, 21 murders and 20 sexual assaults. My last trial was just 2 years ago. I also have the leadership experience. I have acted as the district attorney when Lisa Green is out of the office. I make the personnel decisions, budget decisions, decisions on dispositions. I've argued the budget before the Board of Supervisors. I have that experience necessary. And that's the reason that I have the endorsement of the largest law enforcement association in the county. I also have the endorsement of District Attorney Lisa Green, Donna Youngblood, the two retired Bakersfield Police Department chiefs, Greg Williamson and Bill Rector, and many other law enforcement officials. But when it comes down to it, I'm the one that knows how to do the job from day one.
All right, and to be fair, Ms. Zimmer, we'll give you another minute here on our exclusive live stream with the candidates to explain to the voters why you should be the next district attorney.
I should be the next district attorney of Kern County because I am the best person for the job. I have the experience, the skills, and the courage to do what is right for the voters and the citizens of Kern County. I've had a decade longer of experience than my opponent. I've been here 33 years. I have a decade longer of supervisorial experience. And I have the experience of supervising the gang unit, which is a homicide unit. I have to make decisions about when to seek death and all kinds of decisions, and I have chosen to personally prosecute high-profile gang cases and have been in trial nearly 400 days in the last 7 years. My opponent has been in trial on one case. I currently carry a caseload in which I have a death penalty case coming up, as well as a high-profile cold case murder from 17 years ago. I have the experience, the skills, and the courage to get out there and rise to the occasion and take a tough case.
All right, let's begin our first question with you, Mr. Spielman, and it will be about that. I want to piggyback off what Ms. Zimmer was talking about experience. She's criticized your experience in the courtroom and having more managerial experience behind the desk, so to speak. Talk about what it is, and Ms. Zimmer, you'll get the same question, but what do you need to see in your district attorney? Is it a mix between managerial experience and courtroom experience as well? What makes that perfect mold?
Well, I'm not offended when she talks down about me. The fact of the matter is that I actually have more courtroom experience. She will not say how many felony trials she's done. I've done 105. She refuses to say how many felony jury trials she has done. I've done 21 murder trials. She refuses to say how many total murder trials she's done. I've done 20 sexual assault felony jury trials. She refuses to say how many. In the last 7 years, she has done a lot of work, but those trial days that she talks about when she says 400 for herself, they include weekends, they include vacations, they include holidays, they include days that the court's not even in session. At some point, we stopped recording the days in trial that they were actually in trial, and all of a sudden it became calendar days. So those can appear inflated, but that doesn't even matter. What matters is that I know what's needed in the courtroom because I've had vast experience in it. And that's why I knew to get the DNA technology in there that we needed it. We needed to spend our money with the crime lab that I helped to supervise to get that technology in there. And when it comes to leadership, she is a supervisor. I've been a supervisor. She supervises 10 people. She assigns cases and does employee performance reviews. That's what a supervisor does. I am in leadership. I am in management. She has never done management in her entire time. I make the decisions that affect the entire office. I'm responsible for 250 employees, and I have been for the last 7 years, including starting programs to try to save money and prioritize the work that we do. All
right, thank you, Mr. Spielman. Ms. Zimmer, the same question to you. Experience inside the courtroom, outside the courtroom. What makes a well-rounded district attorney, and have you spent enough time in both?
I certainly have. I think it does take a mixture between a fine trial lawyer and someone who is a good leader. But the most important thing that we need as a district attorney is a good leader and someone that will lead by example. I have more supervisorial and management experience than Ed Jagels did and Lisa Green did before they became district attorney. I have made a number of decisions in my job as a supervisor. I am proud of my record as a trial attorney, and I have never refused to tell anyone how many trials I've done. Mr. Spielman knows how many trials I've done. As a matter of fact, we have conferences and meetings about those. I've done over 80 trials in my life as a prosecutor, a combination of felony trials and misdemeanor trials, and about 50 felony trials, just under 50 trials. Mr. Spielman sent out a mailer that was very misleading, saying that I had done 9 felony trials. He knows that is not the truth, that I've done a number of cases and did 9 felony trials in my first year as a felony prosecutor. In addition, I have been a supervisor for 20 years. 20 years. It's not our job to do trials, but I have chosen to do trials and convicted a number of people of murders, rapes, and robberies as a supervisor.
30 seconds back to you, sir, questioning her on her trial experience.
So now I know that she's done less than 50 felony jury trials. That's less than half of my felony jury trials. There's the number of her felony jury trials. She still has not said how many murder trials she's done or sexual assault trials. It's frustrating because, you know, you want to paint yourself in the best possible light. I can understand that. But when you are going to criticize me that I don't know how to do trials, well, that's kind of ridiculous when you look at my numbers. And when she talked about, she made the decision on a death penalty case, the district attorney makes that decision. That's why it's important who the district attorney is. She did not make any decisions on seeking death penalty. That's the DA's job.
All right, and 30 seconds back to you, Ms. Zimmer.
I have supervised a homicide unit for 11 years. My opponent has supervised a misdemeanor and felony prelim unit of entry-level attorneys. He is in charge of a number of employees, but day-to-day, one-on-one supervision in which you teach people what to do and have contact with them, I have supervised so many more employees in that type of capacity than he has.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Zimmer, for that. The next question will go to you. And I want to talk about, you both hit on this, the backlog of cases. I heard Mr. Spielman talk about the sexual assault kits in the crime lab, or excuse me, you spoke about the crime lab. I want to talk about the sexual assault kits in the crime lab. In 2017, it was revealed there was a backlog of more than 1,000 kits there. How would you prevent this from happening in the future and make sure each one of those cases gets their day in court and gets the proper prosecution?
I don't think that we truly have a backlog of cases that haven't been investigated, cases that haven't been filed. We have to file cases against people and do so who have been arrested by law enforcement and brought in. And we have certain rules that we follow. There's a frustration regarding continuances in court, and some units have some backlogs, but I cannot say in the gang unit we have a backlog of cases. We're ready to go to trial on them, and we wish there were more courtrooms. You would probably have to ask Mr. Spielman about the backlog of those sexual assault kits, because that's unacceptable that has occurred under his administration, that we had that number of backlog of sexual assault kits. And I can tell you this, every victim, every sexual assault victim, we're going to make sure that they get their day in court. We have to do better, though, as it relates to technology. And I feel very strongly about cold cases and DNA. I led the prosecution of the first cutting-edge DNA case in Kern County, actually west of the Mississippi. And I am very, very well acquainted with different DNA techniques, cutting-edge DNA techniques. And so these types of DNA techniques and computer analysis of these techniques will be critical in analyzing these rape kits in the future in order to get us out from underneath this type of backlog.
All right, thank you, Ms. Zimmer. The same question to you, Mr. Spielman, just the backlog of sexual assault kits at the DA's crime lab. Would this happen in the future under your administration, and how do you deal with that?
That just goes to show you who's the one that's qualified to be the district attorney from day one. The fact of the matter is, for the last 2 years, I've been helping to run the crime lab in our county. When she talks about not having done trials, that's because I've been busy as the assistant district attorney leading the office. We have been, for the last approximately 2 years, been examining every single rape kit that has been collected in our county. We changed the way things have been done, and so that we are able to make those analyses. We made it more efficient. We brought in new DNA technology with robotics to quicker process the evidence. And so we've already addressed it, and she doesn't even know that. That shows that she doesn't understand everything that's going on, and that's because she hasn't handled the sexual assault cases that I have handled to know what was important. We actually changed the way we'd have the rape examinations done. We were instrumental in bringing in a contract company that does the examinations, where we had victims that were waiting for hours. Some of them would just go home. It would take a day. And so we went out and we found a better way to service the victims and get that evidence collected. And now for the last 2 years, every single one of those rape kits we have been examining. And so that's what has been done. And on the last answer, when she talked about I've never supervised a homicide unit, I have a a roster right now that shows that I supervise the Special Prosecutions Unit.
All right, so
that's being a little too loose with the truth.
All right, so you have 30 seconds to respond on the experience allegations and also just about the homicide rates that he's talking about.
I know exactly what has been going on with the analysis of those rape kits in the last 2 years. What happened was under his administration in the first 5. Why did it take 5 years in order to address the backlog? I am qualified to be district attorney. Our #1 public safety problem in Kern County is gang violence. And I am the best suited person in that office. I know more about gang prosecutions, and that's what I have been doing in order to address this horrific problem in which we have children who are being killed in their beds and on the streets.
30 seconds to you, Mr. Spielman.
The gang problem appears to have gotten worse while Ms. Zimmer has been the supervisor of the gang unit. Is that the reason why? No. It's the reason. There's multiple reasons why things happen. But it just goes to show that she didn't know that we had addressed the backlog because she doesn't know everything that's going on. Her world is fairly narrow with gang crimes. I have prosecuted a gang murder case successfully where they are now imprisoned for the rest of their life. And so I do know about prosecuting murder cases, including gang cases, and ultimately I am Ms. Zimmer's supervisor too, to make sure that the job gets done. She does a good job as a prosecutor and she does a good job supervising that unit. All
right, I want to talk about that next question. Ms. Zimmer, you've talked about this in your campaign, about the number of homicide rates we've had here in Kern County. This question is to you, Mr. Spielman. How do you deal with this problem? How do you take on this from the prosecutorial side and deal with this issue that law enforcement is having to deal with on the streets as well? What do you do from the district attorney perspective?
You have to take a look at how the caseloads are assigned out and what they are within our office. And so even just a year ago, when we took an examination of caseloads, the gang unit just happened to have the lowest caseloads in our office. And so we adjusted our personnel so that we were able to get some emphasis in other units that were struggling, trying to keep up with very heavy caseloads. And your emphasis is on the most serious of cases. And then you work your way down. And that's why when you have that unfortunate time where you get such a reduction in resources, you start with the lowest of cases that you're not going to be able to devote as much to them. The investigative resources, the limited investigative resources that we have, the personnel there. And so you have to take a look at, and when you have an increase in certain units, and sometimes it takes a little longer than when the police see it, because it has to come into our office, it has to be going into court, getting up to the trial period, where then you're going to really see a reflection of the caseloads. And so you're taking a look to see where your caseloads are heaviest, and then you're going to make your shifts and be able to cover those cases. And so when you have a heavy homicide load, then you're going to take a look. You may need to move a person in there to take care of it, or you may need to take those cases and assign them individually out to somebody else. Because there's nothing in stone about a case has to stay in a unit. Sometimes you have to make those shifts, and that's why for the last 7 years I've been the one responsible for overall in the office making those decisions, those allocations. And
same question to you, Ms. Zimmer, the gang problem. You've talked about the numbers. How do you deal with it from the district attorney side? Can you speed up these cases? Can you be more efficient? What would be your position to how to deal with gang violence?
Well, our biggest public safety concern is gang violence, and I am very proud of my record and the record of the attorneys that have worked under me in the last 10 years for what we have been able to do in keeping the community safe. We've had the largest homicide year on record, and instead of giving us resources, they have taken resources from us. We have had a number of homicides, and the majority of them have not been arrested. People have been doing that. We need to work closely with law enforcement in order to be proactive in those cases. We need to be proactive. When it came time to do a wiretap, and I'm the wiretap administrator, I was able to work closely with law enforcement. I worked closely with law enforcement for almost a year on one single case. That's what you have to do in the gang unit, is you have to work closely with law enforcement, help them with search warrants, help them with different methods by which we can do things in order to come up with a solution. And that's extremely important. In addition to the emphasis of leaving us with less gang attorneys during this time of crisis and shifting resources elsewhere, we've also had the loss of our ballistics and our NIBIN unit. Hopefully we'll get that back up and running in a different method, but it has been very, very difficult for law enforcement to not have certain access to comparison of casings and bullets that were enabled for us to link cases that were very, very important.
And to you, Mr. Spielman, 30 seconds.
So once again, you're going to have a very vague statement that makes it look like we have taken way too much resources away from the gang unit. That is not the case. They had the lowest caseloads by far of any other unit. That's the reason we shifted some personnel around. We were able to, at the beginning of this year, move a body back into the gang unit. That's what you do when you're making a decision on how to allocate the resources. And when she talked about NIBIN being removed, the reason why is because they weren't going to be able to, the federal government pulled that equipment from us. We have had to find our own way of paying for new equipment that is about to come online any time now that is going to solve violent crimes.
All right, and Ms. Zimmer, 30 seconds back to you.
Yes, we have to do better in getting resources for our lab in the form of ballistics comparisons. One of the things that we had to do in one of the cases recently is send a firearm to the Department of Justice on a high-profile case to get a quicker turnaround rather than having it do it for in our own lab. And I think our lab does a fantastic job, but we have to be able to do a better job and not take resources from an area where attorneys are working very, very hard in order to try to help law enforcement solve these type of heinous crimes.
The next question will be to you, Ms. Zimmer, and you'll each have obviously an opportunity to answer a minute 30. I want to talk about this race, and specifically as it relates to the department. You both obviously work at the district attorney's office. You're a supervising deputy district attorney. You, Mr. Spielman, the assistant district attorney. Has this race at all divided the office? Do you feel like this will leave a lasting imprint after the election, whoever wins? And what is the outcome beyond this election within terms to the DA's office? And again, Ms. Zimmer, the question to you.
Well, politics has finally caught up to us after a number of years. When I began 33 years ago, I came in under Mr. Jagel's administration. He was DA for 28 years, and I came in his second year. And while I wasn't around during the campaign, I actually was here for a summer and saw some of it, but I didn't work at the office at the time. There were some leftover fractions that occurred, but I think through a lot of encouragement and understanding that he was able to bring people back in line. As a matter of fact, my first supervisor in the office was one of the people who did not endorse our DA. I've seen a number of sheriff's races here in town where there were fractures, but the sheriff's department was able to put themselves back together. At the end of the day, this race is really bigger than who is district attorney. It's really about the office and the people in that office, and they are our most valuable human resources. I'm proud to say I believe I have the overwhelming support of the clerical staff who supports me, and they are vital to the job that we do, and they are helping me in this campaign. We can come together regardless of the outcome because we are professionals. If someone doesn't want to stay after I'm elected, I would do my best to try to make them feel that there would be no hard feelings if they didn't support me. But that's just the way it is. We're professional, and we need to remain professional.
And the same question to you, Mr. Spielman, just with this race, obviously politics involved. What does the department look like, whoever is voted after this into district attorney, and has this process at all fractured the department?
Well, you certainly have people that are more dedicated to one candidate than the other. You have some people that are far more supportive and vocal about it. One thing I was actually somewhat disappointed in is when Ms. Zimmer solicited from the clerical staff support for the race. I didn't do that. I didn't want to put them into that position where they're going to be choosing who to support in an election. You know, it's a difficult, grueling process, especially when you're not connected to a political machine that has everything already in place, and you have to try to figure out from the ground up how to actually run a campaign. So I can tell you that that's difficult. But dragging people into it, the majority of people, as you would expect, they really just want to be left alone to do their job. And so dragging them into it, I didn't think that was a good idea. And the fact of the matter is that the Prosecutors Association, which Ms. Zimmer belongs to and I don't even belong to it, didn't endorse either one of us. So it does come down to the job is the most important thing for all of us. It is greater than the politics of it, than any one individual. We have great people working in our department, and they're getting the job done now. and I am confident that they'll continue to get that job done. And I can tell you that no one is fearful of what's going to happen when I'm elected district attorney in our office. We're going to have to really get down, get the job done, and learn to come together to get that job done the best that we can.
All right, Mr. Spielman, thank you. Ms. Zimmer, the question, 30 seconds to rebut, just about campaign tactics and questioning what you've done there in that process.
Well, I have been endorsed in this race by 2 of the 3 associations that our employees belong to. SEIU, that is an employee organization in which our clerical, our victim advocates, and our crime lab belong to, and they have voted to endorse me or helping me in my campaign. I reached out to the clerical staff. Sometimes the clerical staff is not treated very well, and I reached out to them and asked them, what are your concerns? And they've told me that they were very happy that I reached out to them and very disappointed the other side did not reach out to them and ask them what their concerns were and what they wanted in the next district attorney.
30 seconds to you, Mr. Spielman.
Every 2 years we've talked to the prosecutors to find out what their experience was and suggestions on how we can improve things. And the clerical, when Lisa Green took over, we met with them, all of them, to try to find out suggestions on how to run things. And you always want to be improving things. The fact of the matter is that I was very frustrated when I heard about the probation officers union when they originally were going to stay out of the race after we both interviewed, but after speaking to the Board of Supervisors about their contract, including her nephew, then that changed to endorsing her, and that's why I decided I was not going to involve these unions that almost every single one of them has contracts coming up that of course they're concerned about that.
All right, we're going to get into our next question. Mr. Spielman, I'm going to direct this to you, and it's somewhat of a, it may seem basic to some, but I think it's going to have a meaning to you guys that you can explain. What's the highest profile case that you've prosecuted, specifically maybe the most difficult case, and what do you remember from that? What do you take away? What did you learn from that case? Mr. Spielman, a minute 30 to you.
Probably the most high profile case that I handled was John T. Allen, and Thomas was the other gang member's name. They were 2 gangsters that were walking through a neighborhood, and there was some young people playing cards in a garage. When they came upon them, they both had guns, and they robbed them at gunpoint. They got all their property, they got keys to their truck, and once they got everything, then just for no reason, just started shooting. And they killed Jesse Harkle and badly injured 2 other people. Then they stole the truck, they drove away, they abandoned the truck, and then the Bakersfield Police Department did a great job in cordoning off the area and conducting a search and actually finding the two suspects that were ultimately arrested and then charged. And the case was one that we couldn't find the guns for the longest of time. The case was proceeding, and they dug up the 2 guns that weren't right where they were both arrested, because they were arrested separately and they changed clothes and lots of different things. And so when they found the guns, it made it a little bit easier to connect them up. But the prosecution itself was challenging, but we got a conviction in the case. And what really stuck out in that case is it was either the verdict or the sentencing. These 2 young men who are now going to spend the rest of their lives in prison were laughing. And it was very surreal to see that happen.
Same question to you, Ms. Zimmer, a minute 30 to answer. The highest profile case you prosecuted, the most difficult, and what your takeaways? What did you learn from that?
Yes, but before I go there, my opponent has to continue to make excuses for why law enforcement organizations do not endorse him. And this time, there he goes again, blaming my nephew for why he lost the probation department's endorsement. The truth is, I've worked with them for 30 years, and they believe in me and believe in what I do. The highest profile case I think that I prosecuted, and I've done a number of them, was the Billy Ray Johnson case, and that is the East Side rapist. He was breaking into the homes of women and children, and he wore a mask, and he was sexually assaulting them. He would take zip ties in to tie them up with duct tape over their eyes, sexually assault them, and wash them in order to rid them of his DNA. What he didn't know was that there was a new method of DNA analysis, that I was the first person to lead the prosecution in that type of admission into evidence a couple of years before in a serial robbery case I did. And we were able to link him to those assaults by touch DNA, which is much more difficult to analyze because he left his touch DNA on a zip tie. that when he was running out of the last victim's home, he dropped a zip tie in the parking lot. Law enforcement saw that zip tie, picked that up, and found not only his DNA on that zip tie, but the DNA of the victim as well. I learned a lot from that case because I learned about science, and I know you can't just go in on a case not knowing the science behind what you were doing. And I learned a tremendous amount of science, and this case has been reported in the Wall Street Journal and in the New York Times.
And this time, Mr. Spielman, 30 seconds to respond.
And the first time that I actually had DNA, I had the first DNA case that came through our crime lab, which was almost 20 years ago. My DNA cases that I handled for murder and sexual assault began 18, almost 20 years ago. And so I've been working with that science for a long time. I realized the need for having, it's touch DNA, and it's also when you have mixtures of DNAs, profiles in there, that I realized that as part of the leadership of the crime lab that we needed that new science to come in. That was the leadership that brought it here. And then she was the first one to present it in court, and that's what is important getting here too.
30 seconds to you. He brought the technology you're touting in one of your most experienced cases. Is that for his leadership, or?
He didn't bring the DNA here. DAs don't know about those types of scientific evidence. What he did was hire, or Lisa Green did, hire a crime lab director who had a relationship with Dr. Mark Perlin in Pennsylvania, and they were aware of that type of DNA technology. Our crime lab director made a type of agreement with the inventor of this system, and they were able to get us cases in which we were able to use the DNA. But DNA is no good if you can't get it into court. And that's what I've been able to do.
All right, the final question will go to you, Ms. Zimmer, and you'll each have a chance to respond. But I want to give you a chance to speak to the people of Kern County. You know, we cover these victims' rights marches. We talk about the impact of crime in our community and the layers and generations that it affects. What would you tell and say to people of Kern County about protecting them in the midst of what we talked about earlier, the budget crisis, having to choose certain cases? What would you tell about a person, how you would protect them, and do you have the resources to get the job done? Ms. Zimmer,
I would tell them that I am completely committed to keeping all residents of Kern County safe, whether you live in Rosedale, Delano, Tehachapi, Ridgecrest, or Lamont. And I am committed to that. But the thing that we have to do right now is turn our focus immediately to violent crime. We have to do that. We have to staff our homicide units, not only the gang unit, but the other homicide unit, with attorneys that have enough time to prepare and are ready to go. We have to take a proactive approach, and we have to make sure those attorneys are well trained with scientific methods, and we have to pursue scientific methods. But in addition, I think we have to reach out to the community and try to solve some of these issues in ways other than suppression. Children enter gangs at a very young age these days, sometimes by the age of 10 years old. They do it because they're looking for a family. They're looking for it because they don't have family at home, or they don't have successes in school. It's extremely important for us to partner with the community in order to reach out to some of these children and prevent them from going into gangs, and to intervene once they've gone into gangs. That's something that I am passionate about. I've been a part of Bakersfield's Safe Streets Partnership for nearly 10 years, and we reach out to the community with law enforcement and the clergy in order to do what we can to get people out of gangs. And if we don't do that, we can't do anything about changing the culture, and no amount of attorneys or law enforcement agents will be able to do anything about it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Zimmer. Same question to you, Mr. Spielman. What do you say to the people in this community that may have been affected by crime that now stretches generations? What do you tell them about how you can protect them and with the resources that you now have on hand?
So what's important is that, you know, there are more crimes other than gang crimes in Kern County. I do know about gang crimes. I've prosecuted that. I supervise the entire office. I know about the importance of that. My dedication to crime victims started in law school when I worked a hotline, because it was before the internet. Victims of domestic violence and sexual assault would call to try to find resources in their area, and I talked directly with them. That began my dedication to them. In the last 7 years, I've helped to start a victim services unit in our department to try to help victims and their families through the process, to give them a voice in court so they would understand what's going on, and we can better serve them and get them through what is a terrible event for them. And we brought in about 10 advocates to be able to do that. We've also opened up finally a family justice center because there's a terrible domestic violence problem here too. And when you're talking about, when you make promises about, well, we need to bring in more staff for the homicide cases, you know, well, where are you going to get this staff from? Where are you going to get the funding from when you're being told we're going to have to reduce our budget 2.5% again this year? And so you can make all these promises, but if you don't know the nuts and bolts about how to get the job done, then it's not going to get done. We finally opened a family justice center that has been open now for about 3 months. It has helped 400 people that have been mostly victims of domestic violence, but also sexual assault. That showed the drastic need for that. And so that's the importance of victims to me.
30 seconds back to you, Ms. Zimmer. He talked about the budget reductions that have been called for by county. How do you deal with that in the midst of that?
I know how to get the job done because I've been getting the job done for 33 years, and that's why law enforcement associations like KLEA, the Sheriff's Department, and the Bakersfield Police Department's Association, as well as every other association that chose to endorse in this race, has voted to endorse me. I have supervised 9 different units in the office. I am well acquainted with every type of crime and every type of way to prosecute crime. So I am well acquainted to do the job. I am ready to be Kern County's top cop.
Back to you, Mr. Spielman, 30 seconds.
You know, when it comes down to it, you know, being angry does not make you the most qualified. You know, using names, calling me a liar does not make you the most qualified, ready for leadership. Those aren't leadership qualities. Being able to take a department and determine what you can do with the resources that you have, how to address the biggest problems, those are the leadership things. And so when it came to, we needed new technology, we figured out a way to get it in there. We needed it for DNA, we needed it for ballistics, we needed it for a victim services unit. We needed these things. They were necessary. It's leadership that brings those things into the department to help.
All right, and on that note, and want to once again thank you both for being here. We want to go into a closing position here. We'll give you each a minute, and we'll begin with you, Ms. Zimmer. 1 minute to make your final pitch to the voters here on 23 ABC Debate Night about why they should elect you the next district attorney.
Well, elections have consequences, and it is critical that voters know for whom they are voting and what they stand for. I am the superior candidate in this case because I have experienced nearly a decade longer than my opponent. I have done things that he has not been able to do. I have the courage to go into court and lead by example. I have a number of people who are endorsing me and supporting me, and I have trained those attorneys who have gone from new attorneys to become prosecutors of the year. I have shown them what to do. It's extremely important that law enforcement, the biggest endorsement that I have is law enforcement. And I have respect for his endorsement, the parole agents, CCPOA, but it's the rank and file street officers, the homicide detectives, the gang officers, these people that I work with on a daily basis that know me, know my work, and know that I will be looking out for the interests of victims of crime in Kern County.
And 1 minute to you, Mr. Spielman. Your pitch to the voters is why you should be elected the next district attorney.
It's the California Correctional Peace Officers Association that has endorsed me. There are thousands of them in Kern County. You know, the endorsements, I have endorsements. I have endorsements of them. I have endorsements of Lisa Green, Donnie Youngblood, 2 retired BPD chiefs. I have Andy Vidak, state senator. I have other politicians and law enforcement officers, retired and active. You know, the endorsements are one thing, and she has endorsements also. But when it comes down to it, I have the law enforcement experience. When she talks about that she's been here for 10 more years than I have, that's because I was in the Army as a military police officer for part of that, and she's older than I am. And so when you look at that, you have to critically take a look at it, and I have the greater courtroom experience and the number of trials that I have done, especially the serious trials. I have the leadership experience. I'm not supervising 10 people and doing EPRs, performance reviews of them. I'm leading the entire office, 250 employees, and figuring out how to get the job done. And so that's the most important thing, and that's the distinction, and that's why I'd be honored to have your vote on June 5th.
All right, and on that note, I want to thank both of you for being here on our 23 ABC Debate Night. It's an important discussion as we've had the last hour here talking about the race for District Attorney. That concludes our broadcast here on all of our 23 ABC live stream platforms for our 23 ABC Debate Night, connecting you with the candidates for Kern County District Attorney. Of course, the election on June 5th. Get out there and vote. For all of us here at 23 ABC, I'm Tim Callahan. It's been an honor serving as your moderator. Have a good night.